With us now, Mark Halperin, editor-in-chief of Two-Way, host of Next Up on Megyn Kelly's MK Media. Mark, it's always good to see you. Can Democrats win if Trump is the one defining the news cycle?
Well, maybe. It depends on what you think winning. They're unlikely now because it's clear they're going to lose a lot in the Supreme Court, and they're going to lose. They have no power control in Congress or obviously the White House. So I think legislatively difficult for them. The messaging is a challenge because they don't have any clear leaders. The DNC does not, and the two congressional leaders are not factors. The midterms, on the other hand, wide open. The interesting thing about the reconciliation package, which I still think will pass, is if you test the individual portions of it, some are popular, some are not. But there's no shortage of Republicans who worry about winning the message war there. So if you define the question of winning between now and next November, I think it's difficult for the Democrats to compete. If you define it as, will Donald Trump lose control of the House, Democrats are in that game.
Okay. I define winning a little bit differently. I was defining it simply on, can Democrats win by only being against Trump? Can they win a news cycle by defining the news cycle about Donald Trump rather than about what they might be for?
Well, you know, there's issues, there's strategy, there's tactics. To me, it's about people. I have no doubt that if Bill Clinton in his prime were the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, they could win news cycles. They simply don't have the people or the person to compete with Trump. And as you well know, and your viewers know, Trump's world class. You don't have to agree with him on a thing to agree, and you should agree. He's world class at this. He gets it. And so if the Democrats had someone who understood how to compete on the level you're talking about, they could, even without their own ideas, I think, compete. But the absence of ideas and the absence of a leader who commands the stage on Trump's level, it's difficult for them to win very many news cycles.
At least the Democrats who are getting the most attention right now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the national level. On the local level, which is now turning into the national level, is Zohran Mamdani, who won the Democratic primary in New York to be mayor. Rare for a president to be asked about a mayor. New York mayors a little bit differently. But this is what President Trump had to say about him. Take a listen.
They're worried that somebody like this communist from New York someday gets elected. I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York.
How worried are Democrats that they will be defined by, call him a communist, call him a socialist, define unbiased policies of state-run grocery stores and defund the police and rent controls, however you want to define him? Are Democrats worried they will be defined by that?
Some are. Some people I know in the Democratic Party, who particularly those associated with the Obama, Clinton, Biden wing of the party, are freaking out, truly. But it's testament to both how far the party's moved to the left and how divided the party is on some of these issues, that there's also no shortage of Democrats who aren't freaking out at all, and some who think it's fantastic, not necessarily because they agree with his progressive policies, but because they like the fact that he's found a way to focus on affordability, which pretty much every Democrat I know agrees. That's the winning topic. That's the place Democrats must compete better with the Donald Trump Republican Party. So, yeah, there's some freaking out, but some of the ones who are freaking out not just because of this gentleman winning the nomination. They're freaking out because other Democrats aren't freaking out.
We've made the point that Republicans should be freaking out, too, because this is a movement. And it may not be the kind of charismatic leader that you talked about, a Bill Clinton-esque person, but he's found a way to capture energy in the same way Donald Trump found, or the Tea Party found a way to capture energy, perhaps a better example in 2010, for example. But you make a big point about affordability. And there's something I think about how people are feeling in America. Back in April, you and I were talking as the tariffs were coming in, and the news cycle was dominated by stories about our 401ks, that they were going to tank, and this was going to be the doom and the end of the Trump presidency. Record highs today, S&P 500 up 10%, the NASDAQ up 15%, the Dow Jones up 4% from April 2nd. When stocks go down, it is the only story. When they go up, it is not a story. Fair enough, we don't do stories about planes that land. But are they equally important to how people feel and the import in the political conversation?
Well, on your first point, until Mr. Mamdani demonstrates he can appeal to people who voted for Donald Trump, which he says he wants to do, it's not symmetrical with Trump. Trump succeeded in appealing to some Democrats who voted for Barack Obama. So there's an asymmetry there. You have to do more than just talk about affordability. In terms of the economy, I thought for a while that the doom and gloom over the tariffs was missing the fact that the fundamentals of the economy, to borrow John McCain's phrase, are actually pretty good, according to most economists I talked to and most business leaders. And now the tariff thing seems to have not a happy ending, an interlude that seems pretty good. The markets aren't reacting negatively. They didn't react negatively when there was turmoil with Iran. And the U.S. is taking in some money. And the president has moved that famous Overton window now on what other countries will accept. If the president had said, you know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, everybody's going to get a 10% tariff, people would have freaked out. Now they're relieved, these other countries, in many cases, if it's only 10%. I'm super curious to start having more conversations with all the masters of the universe on Wall Street and elsewhere who said, you know, a few weeks ago, the president's tariff policy was going to destroy the world economy and the U.S. economy. Today, that doesn't seem to be the case.
That's a good point, and I think this wraps this up with Democrats being against something rather than for something. You're making the point that the doomsday scenario isn't coming true, right? The sun continues to rise. In this case, the stock market now is at a record high. The bombing of Iran didn't create World War III. Everybody feels pretty good now. At what point does the American public become numb to, I don't want to call it fear-mongering, because I think some people have a genuinely and sincerely held belief, but comes numb to the doomsday scenarios of what Trump might bring?
This is all too often people in our business cast this as winners and losers, who's up, who's down, poll numbers. Donald Trump has a lot of unfinished business. Gaza, Ukraine, the tariffs, China, the tax and spending package, the reconciliation package. I think it's at the point where those folks stop is the point at which he succeeds on those things. He's got some successes. As you said, he's had a very strong week in many ways, but he's got a lot to do on his to-do list. And the stakes of those things are huge. These aren't optional things like dealing with Ukraine and Russia. These are big casino must-do items, and he'll be judged, I think, on the success and failure of those. And those who are skeptical, as you said, some on the merits, some for politics, they still have a lot of things they can be critical of.
Yeah. You make a great point. The American people's attention span for things that go well is quite short. There's an awful lot of interest in what will you do for me now. Mark, it's great to see you. Thank you very much. As always, have a great weekend.
In that way, the American people are like television network executives.
Very well said, my friend. Very well said.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.